Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
I am the biggest fan of our guest today. She is like a sister from a different mister, Mrs. Arlene Pellicane. She, author of Screen Kids, but now she has moving to the direction in her latest book of equipping grandparents in a screen-driven world. And I love this, the fact that she is helping and empowering grandparents to be able to connect both in front of a screen and away from the screen, and healthy, applicable things you can do as grandparents to carve time out with your grandkids that don't involve any technology. And we do have our resident grandpa here on the podcast, so we have to ask him, what are some of your favorite ways to connect with that sweet grandbaby of yours, Ron?
Oh, yeah, man. You know, my wife is so much better at this than I am, and I like to think I am. But let me say, you know, our granddaughter will be 3 in December, and we get to watch her 2 days a week. And then our other granddaughter is about 2 hours away, and we get to see her several times a year. And our connection is not usually around electronics. Now, you know, with my wife watching her full days, 2 days a week, there are times that they will snuggle up in a chair and watch. But if they're watching like Miss Rachel or one of the shows on TV, my wife is great at ordering one of the toys so that we can turn off the screen, and then she can go do what she saw on the TV and be, you know, very hands-on and building and creating. So, you know, we love to play Legos together. Right now, Kinsley's all about Play-Doh. And so we'll move, she's got her own table, her own size. We'll move it into the living room, and she can play and roll out and, you know, cut out items, and we'll build Legos and we'll color. Just very hands-on. And I just think we got to get their minds moving in ways to where their minds are doing it rather than the screens are doing it. Now, let's transfer that to you guys. What are you seeing with your kids in that? Because it's the same thing when they're teenagers.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's sad. It's like, it's a lot of, and I just want to say, I personally know Miss Pam, your wife, and she really is, that's a ministry in and of itself. She doesn't even probably realize how God uses her to inspire someone like me, who's like, she's just so tactile, and she's so, you know, she's just creative, and she's got that Kinsley doing all kinds of things, and she's patient and she's calm, and I don't know, she's like her own, like, she is. She is really fulfilling that calling of grandparent well. I just want to say that it's been really beautiful to watch. I think we were talking about this off the air, and I'll just be really honest with you guys. I deal with mom shame in this area. It's a real thing when it comes to technology. And do we give it too much? Have we equipped them to know how to self-regulate? I have older teenagers, and so they need to know how to self-regulate at this point. And so I deal with mom shame on this. So I'm just going to be really straight with you guys that I battle that. I think what we're having to do and what we're realizing, number one, we're going to talk about this on the other side of the interview, because she really said something important about our role of entertainers. So I want to talk about that on the other side of the interview. But I want to say, for me, we have to I feel like I have to present ideas outside of the device. And that's the work part. If I'm just being really honest, that it's worth it. It's worth it. But that's where I've got to do the research and think through some things and make some list and present some options so that they're not zoned into thinking this is the only option.
That's exactly right. We take our phones and away from the kids every time we do a retreat or a camp. Now with our middle school or high school or kids or any group of kids, that we take phones away for the retreats and the camps. And it's amazing the fact that they actually realize, hey, I can survive without a phone. Like, the world continues to spin and life goes on. And it is actually a very rich experience to do all these things and grow up like us Gen X kids in some ways, and they're all just playing in a creek at camp or, dodgeball or whatever. They create games when they don't have that. And I know Arlene talks about this, how boredom can nurture creativity. And we forget that sometimes, but we war against boredom, but boredom can actually be a really good thing. So let's lean in and I encourage you to take some notes, especially grandparents, or if you are a grandparent or a grandparent, if you're a parent and you want to empower your parents as they help to raise and disciple your kids, I suggest that it's not just for grandparents. This is some tools everyone can use. So we'll see you on the other side of this interview. We hope you enjoy it. Miss Arlene Pellicane, take it away.
Splink is a simple way to help families in your church link together spiritually. It comes as a free weekly email with ideas that parents can use to have fun, make memories, and talk with their kids. Those teachable moments give moms and dads opportunity to share spiritual truths and life lessons. And no matter how busy life is, there's always time to Splink. Share d6family.com with the parents in your ministry so they can sign up today to start receiving free weekly Splink.
Right now, we are joined once again by Arlene Pellicane. Arlene is a speaker, host of the Happy Home podcast, and author of several books, including Parents Rising, 31 Days to a Happy Husband, and Screen Kids. Arlene has been featured on The Today Show, Fox and Friends, The Wall Street Journal, and Focus on the Family. She lives in San Diego with her husband, James, and their 3 children. To learn more about Arlene, and you will want to by the end of this, you can visit her website at arlenepellicane.com, and you can check out her masterclass at happyhomeuniversity.com. Arlene, thanks for coming back again.
It's so much fun to be with you. I love D6.
Well, I want to ask you a question before we jump into this that kind of relates to everything, but I'm curious, outside of the normal apps like texting and like the phone app, what is your favorite app to use?
Let's see, texting. I like the Dwell Bible app. So
you went spiritual with this.
I went spiritual because I kind of went with what I use. And so there's a particular chapter that my daughter is trying to memorize in the Bible. So on the way to school, we will often, not every single ride, but often listen to it. And I really like it. And, it has the English voice and it's like, comfort my people. It's from Isaiah. It's very calming. But that one I like a lot.
Good answer. And maybe we'll pick up a sponsorship now.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
Well.
Well, today we're talking about a topic that people may not be talking about, but you are, and I'm glad you are, and that's equipping grandparents in a screen-driven world. And I want to repeat that, equipping grandparents in a screen-driven world. You wrote a book with Dr. Gary Chapman called Grandparenting Screen Kids. Was that birthed out of a need you were seeing, or is it one that you've been anticipating?
Yeah, we had written the book Screen Kids, and that's for parents to read about their kids. But we were realizing like a lot of grandparents are either watching their grandkids more or even taking care of them a lot. Like every single day they have them for a few hours. I remember being in the grocery store, and I was at the Onions, and I heard these 2 grandpas talking, and they were saying like, when's your wife going to retire? And he said, oh, no, she's not going to retire because it's much easier to work than to have to watch the grandkids, because that would be her new job if she retired. So I think a lot of grandparents are facing that they are helping with their kids, their grandkids, and this whole screen thing is something very foreign, something very new to them.
Well, which aspects of technology do you see grandparents struggling with the most? Is it like the social media side of things, like trying to understand Instagram and TikTok? Is it smartphones, or is it things like Roblox, Minecraft, and Nintendo Switch?
can I say all of those things? I'm able to say all those. I think a lot of it has to do with, why does my grandchild have to have this device, or why do they use this device so much? Why are they so dependent on it? And it can be a double-edged sword, because for grandparents, it's a lot easier to say, okay, let's do 2 hours of YouTube, versus, oh, I have to entertain you for 2 hours, or I have to do something, or like maybe you're not going to behave well unless you're sitting down and I give you this video game, or I give you this. So those are hard things, because those things didn't used to exist. And then a child would be forced to say, like, oh, let's go play with your Legos. Okay, why don't you draw for a while? And that would have been the world the child was in. And that would have made it a lot easier. So I think grandparents are struggling with, okay, if I'm supposed to watch my grandchildren and I don't have the energy to do all these things, how can I not default to screens? How can I, it's such a able babysitter. And yet, even if everything that your grandchild is watching, let's say, is good, would it be better for them to learn something else while they're at your house?
Do you hear any of that kind of like back in my day, we went outside and played when we got home from school type thing? Does that come up?
Yeah, you hear that a lot, that, we never had this. And I think it's not necessarily the technology that we're bemoaning. I think most grandparents would say they like having color TV. They like seeing things in 4K or 5K or whatever it is now. They like these things, but the thing that they miss is the connection, that it used to be the TV of yesterday. Like, I think of the show Happy Days. My kids are teenagers. They've never seen Happy Days before. So I decided, like, I am going to get these DVDs from the library, and they're going to watch an episode of Happy Days so they know what this is like. And it used to be that TV would be like a common denominator, that it would be something to bring a family together. So something a grandma and a child might watch together. And I think that's the part that we miss. And so we have to be really intentional with the technology to say, okay, let's find something that all of us can watch together. And then maybe sometimes grandma watches a show with a teenager that grandma would not normally watch, but because the teenager loves it, she wants to learn, and then vice versa. Then now the teenager gets to watch an episode of Little House on the Prairie or Mary Tyler Moore Show or whatever the grandma grew up watching, and that would be kind of a kick. So to be more intentional about how can we use it, because before it was easier to use it all together, and now it's so much harder.
I'm finding how much I have in common with my 4-year-old. When we try to do that, it's like, oh, sure, we'll watch Bluey. Okay. We went to see the Super Mario Brothers movie together, and I think we both enjoyed it equally the same. So that is kind of funny. What are some ways, though, that grandparents can keep up with technology without having to completely immerse themselves in becoming one with the culture?
Totally, because I think there are those two extremes. The grandparent who thinks, I have to spend all my time on technology because this is the world that my grandchildren live in. And then the grandparent that says, like, I'm just going to ignore this because I have no idea what this means, so I'm not going to do this at all. And, I think of Chris Martin. He's an author, and he talks about intentional engagement, that it's in between those two spheres. So I don't think that grandma or grandpa, and to be honest with you, like, for instance, I don't think my mom listens to this podcast, so I think I can say this pretty safely. So my mom does not go on social media on purpose, because we know my mom. Like, so she's your typical, so happy, lovely grandma who cooks and does all this stuff, but she loves WhatsApp, and she loves her texting, and she wants to make sure she gets back to her friend right away. And we all know, like, if you had social media, like if you had Facebook, we would lose you. Like, we would 100% lose you. So I think for a lot of grandparents too, they don't quite understand that, I don't have to answer everything that's posted on social media, or I don't have to see every single thing that every single contact I have posted. So I think it is wise for a grandparent to realize, I don't want to get into this too much. I've talked to grandparents who say, my goodness, I love quilting. And 3 hours will go by, and all I've been doing is watching quilting videos on YouTube, So I think for grandparents too, there's this tipping point of, you don't want to do too much. So you think, like, I want to connect with my grandchild. You also don't want to do too much, but you want enough, whether it's reading a book like Grandparenting Screen Kids. It's very short. It'll give you a base. You want enough to know kind of the general language of what your grandchild is facing, the world they're living in, the things they're using. And even if you say things not right, like, my mother-in-law loves to say tic-tac, and she knows it's TikTok, things like that. But your grandchildren will appreciate that you're trying. So I do think they should learn something, but I don't think they have to be immersed in it. That's kind of what makes you special as a grandma or a grandpa, that you are not addicted to your phone.
I was just looking around for a second to see if my mom was around, because she's the type that goes on Facebook and likes to read it read the feed to us like she's reading a newspaper to us. And once this airs, I'm going to be getting a text about that. So we'll take care of that later. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to send your mom this podcast while we're doing that. But we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and keep talking about this.
The D6 Conference is thrilled to present a lineup of more than 70 experts specializing in family ministry who are ready to inspire, challenge, and equip you with strategies for generational discipleship. Guided by the teachings of Deuteronomy 6, which calls for a love for God and a full-hearted engagement with His Word and impressing His Word on the hearts of families, the D6 Conference is meticulously crafted to instruct, empower, and inspire ministry leaders, parents, pastors, and volunteers to embody the vision and mission laid out in this sacred text. This event stands as a premier family ministry conference, offering invaluable opportunity for your entire team to be inspired, engage in idea exchanges, and foster new relationships with like-minded church leaders. With the choice of breakout sessions led by leading voices in family ministry, you're guaranteed to walk away equipped with practical tools and resources that will prove instrumental in your ministry. Whether in Orlando or Seattle, we invite you in 2024 to be a part of this transformative conversation and explore how you can adopt an all-inclusive approach to discipleship for both your church and your home. Don't miss out on this chance to elevate your discipleship approach. Register now at d6conference.com.
We are back, and we're talking with Arlene Pellicane, and we're talking about how to equip grandparents in a screen-driven world. Now, one of the many downfalls of screens is that it takes our attention away from more important things. How can grandparents keep their grandchild's attention without a screen?
Yeah. And this is truly training. And so grandparent, lean into that whole thing like, because I told you so, like you got this. And it's the same principle that in the absence of screens, your grandkids are going to find something to do. I would start with chocolate chip cookies personally, like do something fun. You don't have to entertain your grandkids the whole time you're there, but part of the time you're there. Maybe there's 15 minutes of uninterrupted time where you are baking together and then you put it in the oven and then they're given something. And really, if you do little things like in Grandparenting Screen Kids, we have all these little tips like, okay, your iPad needs to take a nap now, just like you. And you can have like a little blanket for the iPad. And I mean, it could be super, super cute. And you put the iPad to bed and you say, okay, well, it needs to sleep for 2 hours. And so here's a book. And in the absence of being able to access that. So you have to believe that as a grandparent, you know, so if that grandkid pushes, screams, give it to me, I want it. You as a grandparent have to be like, sorry, buddy, my house, my rules, iPad's napping, here's your book. And if you do that, every single time your grandchild comes, they'll get it. They'll understand like, okay, it's iPad nap time, and now I'm supposed to read this book. And of course, we're trying to find something that they like. We're trying to learn about our children, grandchildren, see, do they like to draw? Do they like to build? Do they like to construct things? Do they want to take apart an old radio that you have that doesn't work anymore? Like, find them. And I just read recently, too, that if there are too many toys around, you know, grandparents, we love to spoil the kids, right? So if there are too many things around, sometimes the grandkids don't know where to go, but it was interesting. I forgot that it was an article I just glanced at, but they were saying if there's just a few options, then they'll say, okay, there's this box of Legos and I'm going to make something with it. Or, you know, here's dirt and a shovel. I'm going to go outside and I'm going to build something. Like, simplify it. It doesn't have to be, here are 1,000 options for you to spend the next hour, but hey, okay, let's draw your mom a picture. So when she comes home, she's had a hard day. Let's draw our picture and make it really simple and realize that your grandkids can do things by themselves, but have that 15 minutes where you are taking a nature walk together and talking and looking for a particular leaf, that you are baking together, that you are reading a book out loud together with them. So those short bursts of concentrated time, and then it's really good, like boredom, that helps your grandkid to be creative. It helps your grandkid to listen and think all day long. If they're on screens all day long, then that really could be a good time for them to be quote unquote bored at grandma or grandpa's house and really get to relax a little bit.
Yeah, my 4-year-old will say the TV needs to rest.
Yeah.
Which is great until I try to turn it on and he's telling me it's still resting.
It's still resting.
Yeah, apparently that TV takes a long nap and I can't
more
turn
time.
it on.
That's hilarious.
Well, Because screens can be so addictive, how can grandparents keep from taking it personally when it seems like their grandkids would prefer their tablet or iPad or phone to actually doing something with the grandparents?
Yeah, so really understand there is a reason why your grandchild is choosing something else over you, and it has a lot to do with brain science and psychology. And just think, when they're playing a video game, this isn't just something that's been slapped together and like, fingers crossed, hope this works. This is a video game that has been programmed, that has been tested, that has brain scientists behind it, that has hundreds of thousands of dollars behind it to see how can we make this as immersive, as sticky, as real as possible, so this player will not want to leave, okay? No one is investing that kind of money and time into how can we make grandma so interesting that this child will never leave grandma's side. So it really is not a neutral thing. The tablet, YouTube, Netflix, any of those things, they're not neutral devices. It's not like the chalkboard of yesteryear. These are things that they have things that your children want because it's done that way intentionally. It learns your child, like the machine learning learns your grandchild, knows, oh, this child loves cats. So every time you log on, I'm going to give you something amazing about cats. And when we've exhausted that, we're going to go to lions. And then we're going to go like this. They know your grandchild. And so for you to understand, this is not a fair fight. This is just me against 1,000 programmers. And don't take that personally.
That's a good point, because my 4-year-old is hyperactive and just all over the place. He doesn't slow down except if he's playing video games. And then he doesn't want to stop. It's like a drug. It's just, it stops him in his tracks and he doesn't want to move. But you take that away from him, he's bouncing off the walls, creating his own obstacle course. So that's a really good point about we're kind of fighting against the industry that knows what they're doing.
Yes.
I want to end with this because research has shown that the average age for first-time grandparents has dipped from the 50s to the 40s, which makes me feel kind of old because I'm getting there.
Totally.
Yeah. But that does mean that many grandparents are really well acquainted with technology and they're using it every day for pleasure, using it every day for their jobs. How can grandparents make sure they're setting the example for their kids and grandkids with technology?
It's a great question. And I think if for grandparents and parents, if we ask this question, if my grandchild uses technology just like me, would I be happy with it?
Ooh.
And if you are a Christ follower and that's important to you and having that legacy of faith is important to you, how has technology touched your faith? And would you want it to shape your child's faith in the same way? And I think so much of parenting and grandparenting is realizing, oh wait, I want that for my child, so I guess I better do that myself because I want my child to be able to read scripture and have the attention span to read scripture. So maybe, wow, I shouldn't be on my phone all the time, shortening my attention span and just watching all these 15-second clips. And then I'm like, I'm out, it's too hard for me to digest. So ask that question. If they grow up to use tech like me, would that be a good thing? And if you feel like, oh man, I have some, bad habits, whether it's too much news at night or, whatever your thing is, because it could be a good thing. I mean, you might be watching sermons, but maybe you're watching 10 a day and that's too many, I know that's probably not the case with what our problems are, but look at yourself first and know that whatever you say is one thing, but they're watching you, and that's a much greater barometer of what they realize is really true. If they see, wow, grandma, grandpa, when they're with me, they put their phone down and they listen to me and they talk to me, across the dinner table, and they'll play for 10 minutes with me without the phone present, they're going to understand I'm important to my grandma, to my grandpa. But if they have those same experiences, but your phone is in your hand or you're constantly doing something else, you're multitasking, they're going to get the message, oh, okay, that phone is part of all of our lives and it probably should be part of mine too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always love talking to you, but I also hate it because conviction comes so strong because you spread so much wisdom with what you're saying and so much real world wisdom that comes through it. And I appreciate it. I think what you've shared today, it applies to ages 2 to 102.
I think so.
Because, kids are getting the screens earlier on and adults are using it all through the end of life. And we do need to have a plan in place in how we approach this. So, Arlene, thank you so much. Again, if you want to check out the book, Equipping Grandparents in a Screen, or Grandparenting Screen Kids is the name of the book. We were talking about how to equip grandparents. Check out her other books too. Check out her website. Anything you pick up from her, you're going to find practical information. And like I said, you're going to love it. You're probably going to hate it at the same time because it's going to hit you right in the heart, and you're going to realize that change is needed, but change is important. Arlene, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.
I come out of this interview, guys, and I'm going to make kind of a strong statement here, but I feel strongly about this. Naivety in this area is dangerous. And that's what I appreciate about Arlene is we can't wander through this as grandparents and parents and operate with naivety. We can't walk into it going, I don't want to learn it. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. We can't approach this area that way. We have to be hands-on and willing to learn, just like from a previous interview, Dr. Jim Weidman. He is the doctor of family ministry, right? Jim Weidman talks about change and just how we've got to be willing to be bilingual generationally. I want to just challenge parents and grandparents. Don't operate closed off in a closed off mindset here, because it really could be a dangerous, it could be, to be honest with you guys, a cracked door for the enemy.
Yes. I'll go a step further. You use the term naivety, and I think people bury their heads in the sand. The remedy for it is intentionality.
Yes.
And again, I wish my wife were sitting here in my seat today, because she's so much better at this than I am at this age and stage. But she plans. She will plan ahead. And so there's intentionality. And I think as grandparents, when we feel a little bewildered, I'll remember an interview we did years ago with Timothy Smith, who said, treat grandparenting like coming to grandma's house or grandpa's house like grandparent camp. I think the screen time alternatives are the same thing. Plan some options. Again, when our kids were real little, my wife was great at hiding 1/3 of the toys, putting them up in boxes in the closet. And then they come back down 6 months later, and the kids think they have brand new toys, and we didn't buy them anything new. And Arlene talks about that. Remove the overwhelming choice and make it 2 or 3 things, and be intentional and say, okay, do you want to play with Legos? Or do you want to play with Play-Doh? Do you want to go outside for a nature walk, or do you want to do this craft? And, and really be intentional about that, so that you planned it. And I think the kids will absolutely eat it up based on observations I've seen through people doing that. Josh, you're talking about the same thing. When you remove the devices in middle school, you didn't just remove the devices, you had planned activities for them.
Yes, we did. And you give them a few options. I think when we simplify, it helps everything. And like you said, the not only some of the options that we gave them, they were creating and making up games. It's kind of a thing that we have. It's a tradition now at middle school camp, our fall retreat, a new game gets created every time we go. And this last time we created a game called Chuck the Chicken. It's like we had this rubber chicken Olympics, like every game you can play with a ball, you can play with a chicken. We'll prove it. But anyway, we had this game, and it was simply chucking a rubber chicken across the field, and all the girls getting around, and as soon as they get to it, the boys chuck the chicken, they run around in a circle and see how many times they can run out of circle, while the girls are going to grab the chicken and go over and under their head like in a relay style, and then they stop, and then the girls team chucks the chicken. And these kids are literally running all over this campus, throwing a rubber chicken and running around in a circle, till the girls wised up and threw it on a roof of a place, and they game over, because they trucked the boys. But it was fun.
They hacked the system.
That they would never come up with that, or never even do something like that if they're sitting there with their screens.
Yeah, and I feel like she really relieved me when she said, it is not your job to entertain your child. And I'm going to tell you, there is a piece of that. Like, I remember early on when we were introducing cell phones and they would get grounded, it felt like grounding hurt me more than the kids. It's terrible. But it's a good thing, because then it's like, you know what? They don't have their device. They need to sit and think about why they don't have their device. And it's not my job to feel like I have to, they need to wrestle out boredom so they can be creative. I want to also say, she said at the very end of the interview something very important. She stomped on all of our toenails, every single one of our toenails. we have to look at ourselves first. We can't have these strong expectations on our kids to not be on devices and be intentional away from the device when all they see is mom and dad and grandma and grandpa with their nose touching their phone 24/7.
Yeah.
So we've got to be mindful of that. That was a good way to wrap it up, Arlene.
It was. Man, she is absolutely so insightful. And I think when we feel inept over something, gathering around these thought leaders on this podcast makes it feel a lot more doable. Mm-hmm. I know we're not going to be perfect at it, but we need to not be naive. We need to be intentional. We need to just dive into this. So I'm thankful for Arlene's insight. Next week, we're going to hear the wisdom of Byron Reagan's friend, kind of an incredible insight on teaching leadership and especially children's ministry. And he has quite a network, and we're gonna toss around some interesting concepts. So join us next week for the D6 podcast.
You've been listening to the D6 podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.